So I'm Michael Lewin. I'm director of the Land Use Institute. And this is our second really, kind of student-oriented Zoom presentation of the year. And so we've had a kind of mini speakers series of people from activist organizations. Our last speaker was from Open New York. And now we have Stephanie Burgos-Beras of the Riders Alliance, and she's going to talk to us about New York's public transit crisis. So take it away.
Great. So actually, let me go ahead and share my screen. And hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. 1 second. As Michael mentioned, I'm Stephanie, and I'm with the Riders Alliance. But before I start, has anyone here heard of the Riders Alliance before, or maybe have read about it in the news, or it maybe rings a bell? Jeff, you have heard of it? Do you want to share with me what you have heard, whether it was good or bad?
Good afternoon. I believe just in reading various articles, I've seen mentions of the Riders Alliance. I can't even recall them, at this moment, but I've just remember reading about the Riders Alliance. Just being mentioned in articles, maybe with just supporting an opinion or a view or something like that.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Probably. That's great. And really quickly, I know Michael did mention that folks here are all transit users, or maybe were transit users, but is anyone currently now taking transit, even on a limited schedule? Oh, you are, Michael?
Yes.
What are you taking? Tell me.
Long Island Railroad. I take it once a week to get here. The other week is a remote, so I'm not taking it that week. I've taken the subway very occasionally, probably 1 day a month, roughly, over the past couple of months. 3 months, not very often.
Okay. Anybody else here?
Yeah, and someone put something in the chat.
Oh, you know what? Can you even see? I can't even read the chat box when I'm here. Let me see. Here it is. No, chat box. Let's see. And Michael says, I read about it in the news, and you take the LIRR. All right, awesome. Well, I'm glad that some folks have heard of us and that people are still taking transit. So wait, now I can't see y'all. I don't know what's I feel I'm acting like I have never done this before, but I'm just going to keep going. Yeah. Anyways, so really quickly, for those who don't know about the Riders Alliance, or who has not read about us, we are a grassroots organization of subway and bus riders, and we fight for reliable and affordable service. And the way that we do that is by holding our elected officials accountable, by using creative storytelling to bring awareness to the issues that riders are facing, and making transit a critical issue in New York City and New York State politics. And the reason we focus a lot on politics and a lot on elected is because roughly 50% or around 45% of MTA's operating budget comes from federal government, not from the government, from New York State taxes or New York City taxes. And therefore, elected officials really have a say in how MTA manages itself and how it spends its money. And so we really do it by holding elected officials accountable. Often you will always hear us say, Governor Cuomo is responsible for the MTA. We actually came out with a hashtag a few years ago called Cuomo's MTA to really emphasize how important it is to hold the elected official accountable rather than yelling at MTA, some huge bureaucratic agency. I'm so sorry. My Alexa started talking. I'm not talking to you. To make sure that people are starting to make that connection. So I'll just keep going. This is just who we are. Here's a photo of us at a rally. And just really briefly about kind of the work that we've done. So we have been around since 2012. I personally joined the organization around 2014 as a canvasser. And at that time, here are just some of our brief policy wins. This is not everything we've done. I will be here forever. But in 2014, we were successful in passing, making into a law for New York City for all organizations with over 20 employees to provide transit benefits. So for those getting commuter benefits, the transit works, making sure that you're able to get some kind of discount for the for the money you spent on transit. In 2016, we launched our Better Buses campaign. So New York City had over 238 bus routes, and launching a campaign to improve that. That's actually how I met Michael. And in 2018, we passed the Fair Fares program, which is to provide reduced Metro card for low-income New Yorkers. And last year, we were able to pass congestion pricing, which is to kind of have a tax or a toll on on drivers entering the Central Business District to raise critical funds for our MTA's capital project. And so operating is running the system, and then capital is being able to build it out. And unfortunately, that pool of money is very low. And this year in 2020, we have been focused on trying to save public transit and try to get some federal dollars to kind of ensure that we have a transit system. 40% of MTA's operating budget comes from fares. And with such a decrease in ridership, we have seen that budget gap in MTA's, in their books. So that's just a little bit about our work. And and if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to tell me to pause. But right here, are there any questions? I cannot see any of y'all, so I don't know why. You know what, let me stop sharing and then go back, because I want to make sure that okay, here we go. Maybe I did something with my, I don't know where you are. Okay, it's fine. If you need to say something, just say something, so I can't see y'all. So really quickly in the transit in the time of COVID. So really briefly, so as I mentioned, what has happened during the pandemic is that we've seen people not take transit, right? Now people are taking transit once a month, maybe once a week. And so here are just a little bit of the decrease across the systems. And so for those who don't know, the MTA is this massive octopus with multiple arms. And so the MTA includes the LIRR, the Metro North, the subway, the bus, and tunnels and bridges. And so really quickly, you'll see, I know you can't see the specifics, but I know most of you are all in Long Island. And so there was a decrease. And this number of the percentage is from compare and contrast from 2019 on November 4th. So I kind of compare and contrast those 2 days. And we've seen a decrease in ridership of 75% on the LIRR. On Metro North, we've seen 80% decrease in ridership. On subways, we've seen a 71% decrease. And then with buses, you see a 55% decrease. And then with tunnels and bridges, we've seen a 19% decrease. And so you start to see that Metro North is the one who has really seen a loss of riders. And you see that buses and tunnels, we've seen a spike in car drivers. People are still, paying the tolls. And we see that buses has not taken such a big decrease as its rail partners, as the LIRR, subway, and Metro North. And so this kind of decrease, like I mentioned, 40% of the MTA's operating budget comes from all fare collections. And so this has really left a massive hole in their budget, and they weren't doing well before. MTA historically has just not been able to manage its money very well. And so what this did was just make things worse. This is not a new problem. It's just, a deeper problem or worse problem. And just a little bit of time of COVID and what it is. And I know that most folks are in Long Island. I was trying to find something like this for Long Island, and I couldn't. It's like I would find something for Suffolk and then Nassau, and I couldn't find like one thing for the entire island. But what we saw really is just where the concentration of essential workers live. And you start to see, for those who know New York City, the kind of the edges of the city right here, Staten Island, which is a little bit, not that dark, but, had a significant amount of frontline workers. And you see Southern Brooklyn and, Eastern Queens and like Western Queens and Inwood and part of the Bronx. These are the areas that have a lot of buses. These are the areas that tend to be lower income and tend to be, people of color. And so we really started to see the disparities of who was working and who wasn't. These areas over here really have like no subway access, which is why we believe that when it comes to bus ridership, you're seeing only 55% change because there's still people using it. And here's just another graph of where this is from April 6th. So this was more in the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, but the green dots kind of show where people are entering the subway. And then in the red dots shows where there are, where people are not getting on. And if you were to put this on top of the other map we saw, in these corners over here, all the way over here, you see that there is no subway. So these are the bus riders that are taking transit. So this is kind of what has happened in the time of COVID. And then this is kind of the campaign that we launched in response to it. So I'll take a pause here and see if any folks have any questions, and then I can kind of go back and talk about what we've been doing. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said something that just kind of, just piqued my mind. You said, you talk about the MTA's budget, and you said they have a problem managing their budget. Why is that? And what does the Riders Alliance do to challenge them to be better at managing their budget? Because they make a massive amount of money. Their budget is massive. And I understand that maintaining all this heavy equipment, train rails, trains, buses requires a lot of money. And of course, paying salaries and stuff that requires a lot. But still, why do they have such a hard time managing their budget?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we believe, at least our theories, the reason it's because there has been no one responsible for it. So when we started in 2012, our entire focus of our campaign was to make someone responsible for the failures of the MTA. But when no one is responsible, no one's going to feel bad that the MTA has no money, right? And I think, so that's one. And then number two, I think what really led to the decay of the MTA's finances was under George Pataki's time, the other governor, right? Because the governor is the one who oversees the MTA. They appoint the chairman, they appoint the board members. So they really have a say. Under George Pataki's time, he mentioned, okay, I'm not giving you money, just go get debt. And they just started to rack debt to run service. Mm. And that's really when the decay started, and no one was paying attention. No one was demanding oversight. No one was calling their elected official to be like, excuse me, what are you doing to oversee the MTA? Are you holding hearings? And so a big focus of us right now is getting the MTA, the elected officials to hold oversight hearings, but the governor does not want to hold oversight hearings. I'm not sure if you guys know about the governor's style of management, but he's very hands-on, and he has constantly blocked the ability to have the MTA, because then if that comes out, that makes him look bad. And so that's really what in terms of what we're doing, we're trying to expose this. And what we do as riders is try to get everyday riders to understand this process, because a lot of people don't know this. They're just like, MTA is just bad, but don't understand that the reason for that is because the governor does everything to push that under the rug rather than take responsibility. And then we have to put more pressure on our elected officials to hold oversight hearings.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. It's probably it's more complex, but there's also that part of like in the 2000s when they were like, take on debt. So I think as of now, for every dollar that we spend, every dollar that you give to the MTA, 23 cents of that goes back into paying public debt.
Does the governor directly appoint the leader of the MTA?
Yes, the chairman and the CEO. Yes, he does.
Okay. Is there like a legislative oversight, or is it purely executive?
It's supposed to be a legislative oversight, but it has not happened. And we have been working really hard to make that happen. but no one is willing to challenge the governor on it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, if no one has any more questions, I'll go back to sharing what we've been doing to kind of get, save the MTA from total collapse. Okay, so let's go back to sharing the screen. All right, share. So in the beginning of this year in March, right after the pandemic, we launched a campaign called Safe Transit. And this was really, you know, while the MTA has a lot of its flaws, we do understand that without a public transit system, there is no New York City, and a lot of people are going to be stranded. A lot of our small businesses are not going to thrive, and just really the makeup of New York City is at risk. And so we launched our campaign called Safe Transit. And like I mentioned, we're a grassroots organization, so we do a lot of fun, different creative ways to get the message across. You know, MTA and transit is just one of those things that's just part of our lives. It's just like brushing your teeth. You kind of brush your teeth, so you got to do it, right? You know, and you just take trains because that's how you get there. And so a big part of our stuff is to bring awareness to the issues and how to make that connection with the everyday rider to the elected official. And so we've done that in a series of ways. So Senator Schumer is the senator of New York. He's also the minority leader. So, you know, we're very blessed to have him in that position of power. And so we understand that he gets to make the decision for all Senate Democrats, right? If Senator Schumer says, this is what the Senate Democrats are going to get behind, then that means that we have, you know, nearly half of the Senate in favor of that. So we really focused our efforts on getting Senator Schumer to understand the importance of prioritizing public transit and making sure that that the MTA gets some federal aid to continue to provide service and not make the kind of cuts that they are they have been alluding to. They're you know, thinking of completely removing the Metro North line. They're thinking of cutting LIRR service in half. And one of the things, and I understand there's low ridership, but we do have to take into consideration that when MTA makes a cut, it's never temporary, it's always permanent. Right? There used to be a Q line, there used to be a 9 line, there used to be a V line. There's been all these lines that have been completely, you know, all these bus lines. And so we know that if they go and cut, it's never coming back. And so what we've done is really put them, you know, kind of put some pressure on Senator Schumer, and once again, making that connection that there's this one person who is responsible for this. You know, we started doing some kind of doomsday approach, which is like, I'm not sure if you can see, I'll just zoom in here, but, you know, kind of showing like what lines are removed, kind of creating a doomsday map and saying that due to lack of federal funding, we did not get this in the actual subway stop. We just kind of did some Photoshop, and we've kind of been promoting these photos of 34-minute, 46-minute waits, right? If we don't get the funding, this is going to become a reality. So we really kind of showcase what's going to happen if the federal government doesn't step in. And here, I know that this is Long Island. We went on to I run Concoma, I must say it's slow, to really talk about some of the cuts that were going to happen to the LIRR. And we know we did some actions out there to really show that everyone is impacted by transit. You know, even the tips of Long Island, you know, to Westchester. And so we really have been making the case. And in the middle here, and I'll once again zoom in because it's a Twitter account, Joe Biden did a tweet on public transportation and its importance, which was really like a big win for us to kind of get our issue on a national level and kind of get that national attention. You know, because when it comes to national issues, there's so many of them. To be able to elevate transit has been a big win for us. And just some more of how we have continued to make the case for transit. So here we went out to Staten Island and we did Trump Safe Transit, and we did it actually, we were really trying to make the case that this isn't a partisan issue, this is a bipartisan issue. Transit affects everyone, no matter where you are, whether you work whether you're a Republican and you're a billionaire, you need the people to work to get to your jobs, or whether you're a Democrat and take the transit, like we were all just trying to make the case that this isn't about blue versus red. This is about access, this is about mobility, and this is about jobs, and it's about recovering from an economic crisis. And if people can't get to work, if people can't get around, that's going to impact our economic engine. We also had people on transit take pictures of safe transit to kind of get out the word and really start to build a movement. And here, Congressmember Meeks, we started to target Congress, representatives more locally, where we had members who were essential workers call on their Congress members to take action to understand why this is so important. And then the other thing that we did here was really try to build a national conversation. So we had this rally with groups across the country in Chicago, in Cleveland, New Orleans, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and with some senators to really make the case as to why transit is so important. And like I mentioned, the first part of the campaign, we spent a lot of time really hammering in why Senator Schumer needed to care about this. And then when the Republicans released the bill without transit funding, he went on to speak about transit, for a few minutes on the floor, and saying that transit needs to be in the next bill, whatever they decide on. And so, that takes us to the next step of how do we save transit? And in the time of Amtrak Joe, President-elect Joe Biden is someone who's taken public transit, the Amtrak, the rail, for his whole life. It's something that he's very known for. And, we're excited that he has an understanding of public transit, and he genuinely uses it and likes it. He likes transit. And so we're hopeful that we can make the case for the federal government to step in. And, but obviously we don't want to in any way, shape, or form say that he is going to solve all of our problems. We understand that the way that Congress works, or that the federal government works, is that the Senate, the House of Representatives needs to come to an agreement, so then the president can make a decision. And, depending on what happens in Georgia, that will make a big difference on whether the Senate goes blue, the Senate goes red, and whether transportation policies will pass. And so that has, leaves us with a few options of how to move forward in 2021. So we're going to continue to make the case for federal funding. We're going to continue to bring up why it's important and really make it federal funding for across the country, right? This is not about New York. So the $32 billion that we're calling for is for the country, not for New York only. New York will get a chunk of that. So we'll continue to make the case for federal funding. There is also, there's new taxes that we're thinking about. New York City is facing a pretty big deficit. And so while we have not formally have come out to support any tax, there are a few proposals like tax to rich that's been growing this year. And there's a gas tax, there's a carbon tax, and a few other options to be able to raise the needed capital to be able to provide service. And we know that if MTA does go down the line of cutting service, we will continue to ensure that that's not 40% across the board, but that it's 40% in areas where there is low demand, and keep the service as is in high demand areas. Sometimes MTA will just do a one size fits all, and we know that will be actually very devastating to those who actually need it. And then the other thing that we're trying to work on next year, is currently 80% of all transit funds that come from the federal government are dedicated to highways, and 20% are dedicated to public transit. Probably we'll see how we can try to change that. And obviously that's more of a long term, when you're only getting 20% of the pie, but you're moving millions and millions of people, seeing how we can work to change that. And the last thing is, if you want to, be part of the team making these happen, right? We're grassroots. That means that we have volunteers and members who care about this and really want to save their public transit system. You can quickly just sign up by texting riders to 52886. And from there you can join it, or you can talk to me right now. You can join our campaign team. We meet once a month to think about these actions. What are we doing? How are we doing it? What it looks like? What's the messaging? And making sure that these decisions are being run and thought by members and riders who use the system every day. To kind of shape our campaigns and our narratives. And so, yeah, and if you want to stay in touch with me, I'm at Stephanie at ridersny.org. So any questions or thoughts about our campaign or?
You have a couple of more questions in the chat. I don't know.
Oh, perfect. Oh, awesome. I'm so sorry. You know what? There's something. Okay, let me see. All right. I'm just curious as to how much of the MTA's budget, or maybe the better question is how much of every dollar as we commuters spend goes towards increasing salary and benefits costs as well as pension? Well, Michael, that's a great question. I can send a budget of the MTA. Actually, if you give me a second, you know what the best part is that everything's online nowadays, so I can just look it up. MTA budget breakdown. I have it here, where I believe that, what is this? Okay, I'm gonna just share my screen real quick if that is okay. So right here. So 33% of MTA's money goes to payroll, 8% goes to pension, 5% goes to overtime, 13% goes to health and welfare. Like this is an old one. This is from February 13, but 16% of their dollars go to debt services, and 22% goes to non-labor, which I'm not even sure what that means. So yeah, and I'm happy to send this over to you. And it kind of, and for Long Island Railroad, it kind of goes down by agency. And this is from the 2018 proposed final budget. So that was 2 years ago. And I'm happy to share that with everyone here.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So I live in the suburbs of like Suffolk County, and I don't ride the train that often. I think I drive to most places pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't use public transport that often, why should we support like increased taxes for like public transportation? It's just it seems pretty difficult. Like I think the problem with the Senate, for example, supporting this stuff is that a lot of senators are from rural places where there's not a lot of public transport. It's mostly driving.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to convince people like that type of group of people to really care that much about public transport.
Yeah. So, so even in rural communities and other cities, they do have a transportation network. So these 32 billion goes to not New York City, just goes to any rural, any kind of transit system that you have, you get this funding. And you're absolutely correct about how do you convince a driver that doesn't take transit? I mean, there's a few reasons. One is that it provides, one, for a driver, when you have less people on the road, you also benefit from that, right? MTA moves 8 million people, so that's 8 million people that's not in a car. So that's one reason. The second reason is that in these more rural areas, they tend to work for companies or for plants or for factories that provide goods to transit agencies. So there's a benefit there. We actually, and I'm happy to share this right now. There's a report that we did where it looked at all the vendors that MTA works with, and they had vendors in 40 states across the country. So that's something that it's a connection to rural senators who, it's like, if this agency doesn't continue, the very few jobs that we have in our rural areas can be lost. So there's that connection too. I mean, and then the other thing, which is something for like developers and people who care in real estate, density, you can do density, you can build when you have a public transit system, which is, and also just businesses, you can just have more economic movement when you have more people together. So, I mean, those are some of the few things. And obviously, as we all know, we provide a lot of money to the federal government that then gets redistributed across the country. And so that's something, another reason for the folks out in places that don't need transit, you know, if you like to enjoy the dollars that come from New York City, the reason that happens is because we have a transit system that allows for density and allows for economic, you know, just more economic activity than you can without it. You know, there was a study that, you know, traffic actually decreases economic activity, because when you're stuck in traffic, you're not doing anything, you're just stuck there. But so, and I think there was another question here that I didn't get to. As a Long Islander, my monthly, So you're absolutely good question about LIRR. And so one of the things that we are trying, one of the things we wanted to do was really start to explore, you know, similar to the transit benefits that we kind of did in the fare fares for MetroCard. We were, you know, there's a few proposals. It's called Atlantic Ticket. It's called how to like decrease the fares for you know, Long Island Railroad. And so there has been some pushback, I think, Michael, we want to do it, and there's some groups that are like, I don't want to diversify the LIRR. Like, I wanted exclusivity. I want it to be for very wealthy people so I can be a certain way. And so we have gotten some pushback around these proposals about like, I actually don't want that. And so I think that's that kind of tension. I think some people choose to move to Long Island to be like, it's like, you know, it's a suburb, it's nice, it's beautiful, you know, you move to the Hamptons, like, you know, like, it's like, there's a luxury. So that's something that we wanted to work on, but obviously that campaign took a pause. And we didn't have a name for it. That's what we were exploring and trying to do research about how open to it. And as Long Island continues to change demographically, I think that there will be more of an opportunity. But if it's, you know, as is, I think a lot of people are like, actually, I'm willing to pay more to like exclude like lower income people on the train. So that's like something that we, you know, it's a point of resistance. So we got to work on that.
You know, just to kind of piggyback on my question and also to the previous gentleman's question, I just wanted to, I wonder if you guys have tested the climate on, you know, obviously it's not just the commuters that are benefiting from, you know, let's just say, you know, myself that are coming from the suburbs or a rural area coming into work for these companies in the city. The companies are benefiting as well. So what is I'm not saying we need to, or even suggesting that we tax the companies, but what is you know, a long time ago, they used to have what was called like company towns, where the companies would invest in a particular community, they build homes for the workers and so on and so forth. So why is it that companies don't do something similar when it comes to like our transportation systems? You know, they're obviously benefiting from all the workers that are coming in. So one would think that they would want to improve, you know, the system by which their employees are coming in. And, you know, so I was just wondering if there's any kind of things being suggested, you know, in terms of that.
It's a great question. So I know that there used to be a payroll mobility tax, and that was, I think, exactly what you are saying. It was a tax on, it was, let me just read it. The payroll mobility tax was a 0.34% tax imposed on the expense of employers. And then Cuomo took it away when he got into office. Cuomo's a really big anti-tax guy. That's his thing. That's his thing, like that, you know. And I think there's a thing about MTA is that it's so political. It's not about people. It's not about what's good. It's about a certain elected official keeping promises to someone that we don't know who they are. And so this is why we have to like flood in here and like, you know, kind of break that through. So there was a payroll mobility tax that was actually implemented in 2009 after the recession. And then little by little, he started to chip it away, Now it no longer exists. And, you know, now that we're in this conversation about what's next, I think we may even have to go back to that potential tax to help. And I don't know how it happened. Like, I wish I knew like who made that phone call, right? Because, you know, I think it's like, this is how it works. And I think we didn't quite focus a lot of our energy on that one, but I think it may have to, you know, this is an opportunity for that to come back. So it's the payroll mobility tax if you want to look more into it.
Hi, I have a question. I don't know if this was asked before, but before there's taxes or added taxes, are the books open? I mean, do people know what the MTA spends their money on? Is that knowledgeable? Are people looking at it?
Yes, so I just dropped a little link here where it's the interactive spending. And here, you know, they tell you the payroll, the overtime, and the pensions and how much they spend. It's visible. They have monthly board meetings where they have these board books where you can go and look at how they're spending their money. You know, I do think, and this isn't always a good you know, sometimes like, I think someone asked, I think maybe Michael who mentioned, someone said like, how much do you spend on payroll? Like a lot of it goes to payroll with, you know, that's like 50% of the operating budget. And that's kind of just going back to politics, just like the union and the governor have a really good relationship, and the governor will do whatever the union wants. And like, there's like, you know, not like, so they can't really get cuts at times. And so not to say that unions play a role, but I think that sometimes the decision, like the needs of the union isn't always the same needs of the riders. And that's fine. Everyone has different interests. But that's all visible, but a big chunk of it goes into like just paying health care, pension. And when you're paying that for like, you know, a substantial amount of people, for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, it can add up.
I mean, I think the New York Times had this article a bunch of years ago, how even like place like Paris, which has a union, and the way they built their system, and compared to how much New York spent and wasted on their system. And I don't know if there's an overview, or someone looks into that, or someone takes away money from that, or there's no oversight, seems to be, how much money the MTA is willing to spend on anything.
You're absolutely correct. There's a problem oversight, and I think this is why our job, or the Rise Alliance has, you know, it's why we're trying to make riders know and to contact their legislator to be like, what are you doing? Have you called an oversight hearing, right? They don't want to do one, and this is the problem. And it has a lot to do with the governor not allowing it. It's amazing how they don't want to challenge the governor. I have no idea what he has on them, but what you're bringing to is just capital costs. And I think with capital costs, it's a little bit, you're absolutely correct. They you know, come up with these biddings and these negotiations, and they go for the highest bid, and like it takes forever, and there's just no oversight from the governor, and that's a real problem. Yeah. Sorry, but I'm sorry, that's not, I don't have the right answer for that. It's I think you and I are in the same boat. We're trying to figure it out as well. You know, and I think what we've done is just continue to bring up those stories of of Paris. And every time we meet with them or we do something, we say it's possible. We know it's possible, but it's just, it takes the will to change the way things have been done for decades. And then when Andy Byford came and joined the organization, he even like brought that out, and then he left because he couldn't even, a lot of people in the MTA are not willing to change, and that's really a problem. Like they're just like things, This is how things have always been done. And I think that's a real problem that we have to address. But the only person who's going to do that is the governor, because he is the one who's in control. If he doesn't take it on, no one else will. Got it. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. So really quickly before I leave, what are we all going to do? What's the one thing we all know we can all do from following this meeting?
We should ask our legislators to start holding oversight meetings on the MTA.
Exactly. We should definitely call our elected officials. And I think as of now, calling your federal legislator in Long Island and wherever, to be like, what are you doing to fund transit, and what are you doing to hold, for your state legislators, what are you doing to hold the MTA accountable? But most importantly, always go after the governor. And if you always experience anything on transit, please tag the governor. He is responsible for it, and we should remind him every single day. Great. Oh, you are on mute, Michael.
I guess it's time I should close out. So thank you for a great speech, great presentation. It was very, very well done. And I look for those of you who are my students, I look forward to seeing you in class. And for those of you, whether you're my student or not, thank you for showing up.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.